Today, we're talking with Dr. Allecia Maine, the animal healer. She has an incredible background, which includes over 28 years of direct work with animals and their humans. Her work stems from traditional Chinese medicine, Qigong, and quantum physics. She also holds a PhD in holistic health counseling, and she works with horses around the world, releasing body tension and unrecognized pain to allow for their bodies to realign themselves naturally and quickly, which often shows up as rapid shifts in behavior and health issues. For Allecia's more detailed bio and contact info, be sure to see the show notes for this episode. Allecia Maine, thank you for joining us on another episode here of the Reinforce the Horse podcast. I'm here with my trusty host,
Alyssa.
And welcome. I know we had some technical difficulties the first go of this, and hopefully we got that all ironed out. So we've introduced you a bit prior to bringing you on live here, but if you'd like to just go ahead and share just a little bit more about yourself and kind of what interested you in talking about Reinforce the Horse.
I love horses. They're pretty awesome beings, and they're pretty incredible teachers. I appreciate where you guys are coming from about reinforcing the horse, because so much of what we do to and with horses seems to be about humans, human issues, human stuff. And really, I mean, we're trying to take animals that we claim are, or given to us to ride on their backs. But the things that we do with them sometimes are so, in my opinion, because I'm not a performer, I'm not any of that. I just love connecting and being with horses. There's so much absurd stuff that we do. And so often, sadly, it's not about the horse. So I really appreciate where you're coming from.
Well, thank you for that. And as our listeners kind of know by now, Alyssa and I, haven't been in the horse realm forever. In fact, I'm 41 years old, and it was in my late 30s, so 36, 37 years old before I even got around horses. And it sounds like, you had sort of a similar story. So you grew up in the Bronx, in the city, and wound up relocating out to, I don't know, it'd probably be much more country than the city. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that, because that really resonated with me. And by the way, so I happened to just open up my Facebook page one day, and lo and behold, a post that you shared with the caption or title Mustang Meditation was up on my feed. And from the video, it just looked like a sea of horses, for lack of better terms, just laying down, chilling out, meditating. And that totally captivated me. And there's a lot of background leading up to just seeing that video on Facebook. So we could think AI, we could think the cosmos or whatnot. And then here we are connecting to talk about those horses. So yeah, if you could just maybe share about your transition from the city and ultimately reconnecting with nature and the horses.
So I did have a background with horses. Even though I grew up in the Bronx, from the time I was a little kid, I didn't have steady and consistent riding lessons, but I had always somehow found a way to get my parents to get me around horses. And when I was about 10 years old, my dad had moved from New York City to the Pocono Mountains to run a resort. And at that resort, they had a ranch. They had a horse barn. So there was a mixed use of like property owners and also timeshare owners. So they had a barn where people had their own horses, plus they had horses there for rent and for people to take trail rides. So from the time I was about 10 to about 13, I pretty much spent most of my weekends in the Pocono Mountains riding horses. And then I went to camp when I was about, I think the summer that I was 12 or 13. And then the horses kind of left my life for quite a long time. Rode when I could, but my dad had landed up moving back to the city. And so horses really didn't really re-enter my life till I was like in my 20s. And I had started, my professional work was as a fitness trainer. And that kind of led me back to horses, oddly, through a practice that I was involved with a Qigong master from China in Manhattan. And as I was practicing Qigong, it really, there was such a shifting, I guess, in my awareness and in my being that it was like, oh my God, it's time to get back to nature. And at that time, the only real nature that I was experiencing was volunteering at a therapeutic riding facility that they did out of a stable that was literally a brownstone in New York City that got converted to a horse barn. Really not conducive to the horses on any level. But it was my reconnection to the horses. And
very interesting.
Yeah. And then from there, I started traveling a little bit more upstate back into the woods to New Rochelle, New York. And I found a barn there that I started riding at and I started volunteering at. And I started one of the first autistic horseback riding programs in that part of Westchester. And so it just, I don't know, I just got brought back home to the love of horses. And then September 11th happened and I moved out to Colorado. And within 2 years, I had my own horse. It was my first horse. And that just led me on a really fascinating journey of everything I had been taught about how you be a horse person, what you do with horses, who they are, what they are. I mean, when I grew up, my dad had the perspective, horses are big, stupid animals and they will try to hurt you. So you have to be in charge. So literally.
So was it like that cowboy up mentality and?
No, it was a stupid Bronx man who had no idea about horses. It wasn't even a cowboy mentality. It was just a type A control freak who thought he knew everything and, like donned a pair of cowboy boots on the weekend, but he had no clue. And he had no clue about like deeply connecting with animals. Now, this is also the same man that used to take my sister and I when we were younger to the Bronx Zoo every weekend to see the animals. So I was born loving animals. And then when we started going to the Bronx Zoo, it just became like, who are, it's weird because sometimes you don't have the words for things that you feel. So the only context you sometimes have for things that you don't understand is what other people tell you about them. And then hopefully,
AKA conditioning.
And then hopefully that deep knowingness in you that doesn't even have words to like put together to it because it's just not in the realm of familiarity of how people are raising you or what they're teaching you or what they're conditioning you to. And so I spent a lot of time with this deep knowingness, but didn't really know how to express it. Because in this world, in this culture, you just accept that that's what it is, even if it doesn't feel right to you.
Right.
And it wasn't.
Oh man, there's so much to unpack there. could you go back to the Qigong? How did you wind up getting involved in that? And what I'm hearing is that practice may have led you into the autistic work or vice versa.
So Qigong is an ancient self-healing martial art. So way, way back, going back like 5,000 years, maybe even longer, the Taoist masters who basically lived in the woods, in the wilderness, started watching and observing and studying the animals. And from studying the animals, studying what they ate, studying how they moved and how they stretched, studying how they conducted themselves and were able to stay healthy, they started to develop the systems of traditional Chinese medicine. They started to develop acupuncture. They started to develop understanding foods and herbs and the properties that those had in order to help themselves heal. And so it's interesting because Qigong is one of the few practices that was truly based on watching and observing the animals. And it was literally the animals teaching the humans. So how I got there, I have absolutely zero idea, other than it must have been my
Interesting.
destiny, because I was a fitness trainer and then I was going to, be this business person. And it
Mhm.
wasn't on my bucket list to study with a little Chinese guy that I couldn't even understand that was going to stick me with needles. It just was not anywhere even remotely on my bucket list. But
It
that
sounds like
happened.
kind of like Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid experience of sorts, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the good news was I wasn't getting beaten up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
right.
but I had a client, one of my clients at the gym, she really kind of became my spiritual mom. So, I was working at the gym. Some things were coming up, and I guess this was the beginning for me personally, like of my spiritual journey, because I was miserable. I didn't even want to be on this planet anymore. It was so painful to be here, even though I didn't understand why it was so painful. I didn't know. And so
I
when
hear
she came in,
that.
yeah, when she came into my life, she started teaching me about meditation. She started teaching me about macrobiotic cooking. She was the reason I first went to a chiropractor or even understood, like, here I am as a fitness trainer, right? I can build bodies. I can help people climb Mount Olympus that are in their 80s. I can, help women like rebalance from osteoporosis and pregnancy. And I can help, clients like that were stiff as a board become really flexible. And, I
Mhm.
worked with a lot of celebrities and CEOs, and I loved my work. I just didn't actually realize how limited my work was till I started also understanding the emotional side of things, the psychological side of things, the spiritual side.
Mhm.
And so to just be totally honest, I have no idea how I got to studying Qigong, because
That's beautiful.
Would you say that your Qigong practices and what came after and during that helped your connection with your horses?
huge. It helped my connection with everything, because quite honestly, I didn't realize. So growing up in my family, like, I had to put on a lot of armor. There was like a lot of emotional and psychological stuff that went on that I just assumed that's who I was. I didn't really recognize till I started studying Qigong, till I started sort of pulling off a lot of the veils of what had happened in my childhood, the trauma that happened, the abuse that happened. Like, I just thought I was really a tough, badass type A person that, was like forward and everything is everybody else's fault. And I didn't recognize that in this lifetime, like, I would go through a pretty deep spiritual journey that would help me take a look at all of that stuff within myself, but also recognizing, like, as a society, as a world, how we behave, what we think, how we're conditioned to think, like what and how disconnected we are from nature, and how we kind of keep perpetuating this through our education systems, through our denial that we are also emotional, psychological, and spiritual beings, as well as physical. And because of Qigong, every single time I practiced, and that practice took me deeper and deeper and deeper into myself, past the issues of my ego, and how it got created. And the ego is not a bad thing. The ego actually in childhood gets formed because it's protecting us, because there's too much intensity going on around us that we can't handle. So the ego kind of says, hey, come up into your head. Trauma's going on. We live in a traumatizing world. We really do. It's very sad to say. The world itself, the planet itself, is not traumatic. But what we humans have done has become so
made it so,
traumatizing.
yes.
Kind of made it normal.
Yeah.
So the ego is this thing that will go up into our mind so that we don't have to feel what we're experiencing in our body, because that feeling feels like we could die. And it's a safety mechanism. And it's the way our culture has been created. Be in your head, think about it. Don't feel it. Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually the reverse. And so what this journey did and helped me realize was, whoa, it's okay that the ego asks us to go up into our head, because the brain can't feel. Only the body can feel. But we have to come back down here at some point. And that was the journey that Qigong really led me to. Like, even though I was a fitness trainer, so strong, was totally a very physical being. Part of my physical being was a cover so that I would feel safe and protected. What Qigong did was make me get back into my body at an essence level. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, about what age range did that awakening sort of begin to take place for you?
Mine probably started at 1.5, but it was through a trauma. And I didn't realize that because of the trauma, it would, two things. One, I didn't realize the trauma was actually trying to take me out from being the powerful being that I am, because I was here to do things very differently than the system teaches you to do. So,
sure.
I do think that there's light, and I do think that there is dark. And I do think it was an attempt on the part of the dark to keep me quiet and to keep me out of my true power. And so I think that from 1.5 till about 19 or 20 years old, that was the space where my being was trying to figure out how to awaken.
You mentioned getting your first horse after you relocated to Colorado. Tell us about this first horse.
Cisco came to me as actually a ask of the universe to work with a horse, maybe like 2 days a week, for a friend whose son was 7 years old, and he still had to wear a diaper because his bowel muscles had not closed. And as she and I were talking, I thought, from my fitness training background and knowing bodies and knowing muscles, I was like, oh my God, putting this kid on the back of a horse, he's going to have to start engaging his bowel muscles, his belly muscles. Like, that's the answer, So I left her house that day and I just said, universe, I'd like a horse to work with 2 days a week to be able to put this child on his back and let him walk around and then learn to canter and trot and all that. And 2.5 weeks later, I walked out my door. I went over to my neighbor's. She was having a yard sale, and on one of the tables, there was a halter and a lead rope. And I was so attracted to it because it was my favorite colors of pink and gold. And something inside of me was like, you need to buy this. And I'm like, I don't even know why I need to buy this. I don't have a horse. So I bought it. And about a week later, I saw my old roommate, and she had Cisco. And I had met Cisco a year before. He was her horse. She knew that I did animal communication. She knew that I did body work. And she asked me to come and see him because she was kind of scared of him because he would take off with her. And she wasn't the most confident rider. She was a new rider, but she loved him and she wanted to take care of him. And it was the weirdest thing when I worked on him at that point. I was just like, I don't even know why I'm thinking this, but I feel like this is going to be my horse. And this was a year before. So after I had gotten the bridle and the halter and the lead rope, I saw her one day, and the first thing she said to me, she didn't even say hi. She goes, I want to give you Cisco. And if you take him, I can never take him back. And that's kind of how Cisco came to me. I wasn't expecting to have a horse of my own that I needed to pay for. At that time, I mean, honestly, it was dirt cheap. It was like $125 a month to have him. She didn't charge me anything for him. She just basically gave him to me. And I thought, all right, well, here's the horse that I need to work with this kid. That never worked because every time we went down to find Cisco, he never showed up. And basically what he ended up telling me was that he was not supposed to be anybody else's therapy horse. He was my therapy horse, and he was my medicine horse that was going to teach me about life. So that was when was that? 2003.
That is such a beautiful.
And he just recently passed.
Such a beautiful story and like calling, as I've been referring to those moments. Do you have more horses now? Do you still have him?
Cisco passed away last year in July. And it's interesting. Thank you. I had written, during our time together, he told me to show up one day. He said, you're going to take dictation. We're going to write a book. So back in 2007, I wrote that book, and I'm now just re-editing it so that it gets out to the world, because there were many things that Cisco decided he wanted to teach me, not only about my own personal way of being, but that he wanted to actually teach humanity. And so there was a lot of things in our relationship in the beginning that, looked like stubborn and stubborn. Like both of us were very, very stubborn and pretty adamant about, like, I was adamant about, training him, even though I never knew how to train a horse. And he was adamant about training me to learn a very different way of being with horses. So when, as I'm reading through this book, I'm laughing, I'm crying, I'm just remembering so many things that make me realize, I was like, oh my God, that horse raised me. Like he raised me into the human being that I am today. And I remember asking my Qigong teacher once, I said, what happens when you study, with all the human masters that you can study with? Because you realize, like, every human master is going to have ego somewhere in there that they have to work on. And he said, well, after you get to the place of, studying with the humans, he goes, then your highest teacher is nature. And that's what happened. Cisco became my highest teacher. So reading through this book and recognizing, holy cow, how much stuff I forgot, about how stubborn I was and how stubborn he was. The day he passed, I was meeting the farrier up at the ranch where he was. And as soon as I saw him, he had water like gushing out of his nose. And I was like, oh my God, you're in choke. And I looked at him and I knew I wasn't going to be able to pull him out of this. I'd pulled him out of many things. Like he had colic a couple times that pulled him out of. He smashed his eye. We never really saw a vet. He had a really bad accident with one of his shoulders. I didn't even know if he would still be able to walk, let alone ever ride again. And that day, I just remember looking at him and I said, listen, I don't think I can get you back in your body. I see that you're leaving. I need you to go. If you want to go eat some grass, and I need you to lay down, and I need you to leave. And that was the hardest thing I ever had to say to somebody I loved. But I knew that his whole system was failing. And I knew that if I couldn't get his energy system aligned and get him back regulated into his physical body, that I just didn't want him to suffer. And I knew I couldn't get a vet there fast enough. And I did not want the ranch manager to put a bullet in his head. And I asked him, I said, I need you to do now. And he did. 20 minutes later, he left. And I had to laugh because as I'm reading this book, I'm thinking about how stubborn this horse was and how stubborn I was to recognize the place that we ultimately came to together, you know, where I could try to tell what needed to happen and he could listen and he could trust me. It just was mind blowing. Yeah. You know, my entire journey with blew my mind.
God, what a story.
Yes.
Huh.
I feel you there. I can empathize. I lost my first horse actually 2 years ago. And I had a pretty strong connection with her. She was the reason I know a lot of what I know now. She was the reason for my horsemanship shift, if you will. And she just, I feel I guess I feel the connection and the emotion tied into your whole story.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. They get closer to us. Yeah. They get really close to us. And it's a beautiful thing because horses are really here. One of the aspects of their spiritual nature with us is to help us reclaim our own power. And I always thought that power was power over. I didn't really realize that power is power within. And, you know, like I said before, like we've got this education system that dumbs us down to our own instincts. We get traumatized, so we go into our ego, and then our brain's running the show. But our brain can't feel. And so we do things that we're conditioned or told to do, but that if we were connected with our gut, we would never do it because we realize like that's just that's not even common sense, but B, it's not even ethical or moral. And Cisco, through my Qigong process and pulling off the veils that I needed to pull off at that time, Cisco really became my moral compass. And even though Cisco wasn't a Mustang, there was something about Cisco that knew the authentic nature of the collective consciousness of horses. And and now that I have Mustangs, I just am so blown away sometimes how well he prepared me to be able to show up and be a student of the horse, let the horse be my teacher, as opposed to me teaching the horse. And that doesn't mean that I don't have healthy boundaries with my horses. I've got a mama and her two babies. One of the babies she came with one of the babies when he was 5 months old, and she was pregnant with her next baby. So even her next baby, like, I've known from day one.
Wow.
And it's interesting because it's this beautiful balance of, we got to have boundaries, right? We've got to stay safe and show me who you are. Show me what you're about. Like, let's actually be together. Like, one of the babies is now he's going on 4 and she's going on 2. And it's kind of mind blowing because we don't have the kind of relationship where I have to make them do anything. We're not on an agenda. I've learned from them how to be with them so we're safe, so I can get a halter on, so I can pick up feet. But it's not because I'm trying to get them somewhere. It's just because it's what we need to do. Just like if they were out on the range and mom's going to teach them certain things that they have to do. But there isn't an agenda that she has about, this is who you're going to be, this is who you're going to become. So it's been pretty amazing because it's rare that you get to be with mom and that you get to watch the process of her raising her kid. Like, the horses are on my friend George's ranch, and George and I decided from the get-go, like, even though she's a baby and she's born here, we're not doing the whole imprinting thing. We're not even going to touch her. We're going to let mom teach her what she needs to. And I mean, from day one, she just kind of came right up and she's like,
Oh,
okay,
that's so
Peppy.
cool.
So it was like, okay, we're not intentionally trying to imprint you, but I also don't want to give you a complex by pushing you away from him. So everything really came about because of what she was okay with, not because of what I made her okay with. I did have to do, we practice with halters, and the kids get their feet trimmed, and there are just certain things that it's like, look, there's certain things in your life I'm going to have to ask of you so I can just keep you healthy. But we haven't, like, that's what our training has been. It hasn't been like, oh, I have to move you, or oh, you have to do this, or oh, you have to do that. It's been more like, okay, how do I fit myself into your world? How do I understand how you guys communicate? What's natural for you that I'm not making unnatural? And that's really how the Mustang meditation that day came about. It was just my hangout with my horses, and everybody was like laying down, and it was such a mellow, kind of overcast day. And Pooh Bear was laying down, so I just went over and I sat with him while he was laying down, and his sister laid down, and it just spontaneously came from there because I entered their world. I entered their consciousness, and I feel like
and
it's a privilege,
Gosh, it's such
honor.
a magical place to be. I mean, we just got our second Mustang about a week ago, and then our other guy, he's a domestic Bashkir Curly, but so our Mustang Willow that we've had a little while now, and Cody the Curly, it just recently, like within the past few months, started just laying down, usually because we go out there and like have a meditation in their field, and they just sense that energy and reciprocate it and lay down and relax and
call us over when we're outside of their pen. And just being able to spend time with them. I mean, because we could see them from when we're doing our daily stuff, and we'll just they'll just stare at us, beam us is what we call it, with their ears up, and they're just like, come over and sit with us, come over and take a nap with us. It's like, really?
And so we definitely
I mean, But how does that feel that it's like an invitation
Right.
instead of a
Right.
dictation,
Yeah.
right? Like how much more
Yep.
trust gets built because you become trustworthy
Yep.
humans that listen rather than
And it's
tell,
been my experience as well that
you
it
know?
just being willing to sort of hold that space for them, they reciprocate it and it shatters the ego, whether we like it or not. It just, you know, it, every time they've allowed me into that space, it just, there's, uh, there's internal awareness and healing that goes on within me every single time. And it's kind of like peeling the layers of the onion back. I feel like, there can't be more layers that can be peeled back. And they're just like, well, let's go there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and that's really what they do for us. So it's a very, very sacred space.
mhm.
It's very sacred. And I call it communion with all life. It's the place that is almost like traveling between worlds, right? Because we have this 3D
Yeah.
experience of what we've been conditioned and told how life is. And so even with the animals and the horses, right? Cisco taught me at one point, he said, do you have any idea how afraid people are of horses, even really good riders? And I was like, what? And he said, yeah. He goes, there's very, very few riders that are actually truly at peace and in harmony
Oh,
with their
it's
horses.
amazing.
There's always some sort of element of control that's coming from fear. And it really took me a while to sit with that one because Cisco was very good at, like if he didn't want to ride and we were just sit and have conversations about stuff, or he was making me take notes. Like he literally said one day, come with a notebook and a pen tomorrow. Like you're going to start taking dictation. So he had this way of showing me truths about myself, but also myself as part of humanity. And so when he taught me things, I was so grateful that I was being given an insight and an awareness to understand things at a very sacred level. But that he also was willing to say, listen, the reason why I want you to take dictation is because so many people don't understand this about horses. And even though people think they can hear their horses, they're not hearing the spiritual messages that their horses are sharing with them, to further educate their soul. And it always blew me away because I didn't want to think that that was true because I thought, well, if somebody's a horse person, and they know what they're doing, like, how could they be afraid? But he taught me to see things in a very different way. He taught me to just see things as they are, not as I wanted them to be, or I wished them to be, or I was taught them to be. He taught me to see very, very clearly, without judgment, but just the reality of so many ways in which there's such a disconnection in terms of communication at the essence level between us and horses and just the natural world. And every single time I was with him, he really was a bit, where he used to live, the person that took care of him was named Mario. Mario used to call him a pain in the ass because he was a paint horse. But it's interesting because what I used to call stubborn, I really started to see was like, Jesus, man, Cisco is an amazing teacher of what actually is. And he's showing me how to see life the way it is. not make any excuses for it, not cater to any bullshit, but to really see things as they are. And it was very interesting because, for so long, I always thought like knowledge was all this understanding and information you get in books, and then you understand how to be a business person, you understand how, and I'll tell you what, we live in an information world now, we live in a world of massive amounts of information. And man, I've never seen people so unintelligent, even with all of the information, right, that we're swamped in. So I got to become humble enough in my own being to recognize, like, even with all the stuff I know, there's so little I know, and all I can ever do is show up in a situation and just pay attention to my gut and see what's actually happening in that moment. And how, not just, what people know, but like, how do they feel and how connected are they to themselves and how connected are they to nature? Like, do they just have knowledge or do they actually have wisdom?
Oh, that's so profound because, Alyssa and I just looked at each other as you were saying that. I think there's just, I don't know, the epiphany of, and the feeling of what you've been through and your story just really resonating, especially like, where I'm at personally in my life. And what a beautiful expression of that love and connection that you've had with that horse, and being able to, I suppose a lot of naysayers would hear and say, oh, the horse like channeling a book, whatever. And I've come to find that, it doesn't matter so much like what the naysayers, or it doesn't really matter at all. It's because, like you said, we don't know, and getting comfortable with what we don't know allows things to happen that we further don't know and understand. Yeah.
But yet, crazily, if you allow yourself, there was a huge thing for me, and you were asking before, like, about my spiritual awakening, right? So I think it started at 1.5, at least trying to wake me up. Then around 18 or 19, I was really heading for that spiritual crisis, because it was like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, I don't even understand why I don't want to be here. But something in my soul, it feels so off from what my head is telling me to what my body and my being are telling me. And that was kind of like the catalyst for my spiritual path. And that's what led me ultimately to study with Cisco. And I'm grateful for all of the things that I've experienced on my path, all the things I've seen, been through, all the teachers I've studied with. And, one of the things I sense that we tend to prize in this lifetime is, how much educated knowledge you have. I mean, I have a PhD. Like, I've got a pretty high level of knowledge. And yet, it wasn't the knowledge itself that I acquired from getting the PhD. It was the experiences that I went through. Like, forget that I did a PhD with a school. Cisco was my PhD in life. And the fascinating thing to me is that even with all of the things that he taught me, and even though I had to literally let go of all of the supposed knowledge I had in my head to really acquire and understand what wisdom is on this planet, and especially in connection and communion with the animal kingdom and with nature, you start to realize after a while, who cares about all the stuff I have in my head? None of that is actually allowing me to show up in full presence to what is here in front of me in this moment right now. Like what you guys just shared about, you'll be doing stuff and then your horses start staring at you and then they start drawing you in like, hey, okay, you're doing enough stuff that you stopped thinking. Now you're finally in a state of being. Come over here and share that state of
Yes,
being
it's
with us.
exactly it. Yes.
That's exactly what it is.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful
And that's,
display of all the
yeah.
good things.
And it's reinforcing to all of us involved.
Yeah.
It really is.
And to a certain degree,
Yeah.
that's where
And
reinforce the horse stems from.
it's that interesting thing too.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, because honestly, when you reinforce the horse, because you're listening to the being that has far more, I mean, like I said, my dad told me horses are big, stupid animals that are going to try to hurt you, so you have to control them. I don't control anything. I walk into that pasture with 26 horses, formerly wild horses, and some horses that were really pretty pissed off that didn't really trust humans and 3 burros.
Mm-hmm.
I've got nothing. I don't have a halter. I don't have a lead rope. I don't have a stick. I don't have a treat. I've got me. And what these horses have taught me about being able to show up with no agenda in true essence, and then how they will choose to interact with me, and the confidence that they've given me to understand the true essence of horse. It is not a being that wants to come and hurt. Horses aren't violent beings.
Mm-hmm.
They play, they love, they spar, you know, in terms of like when it's, I mean, my boys are both gelded, so they're not going to breed, but like out on the range, you know, when stallions spar to get a mare. It's not out of anger.
Mm-hmm.
It's not out of, they don't start wars. They just know
Mm-hmm.
they're there to produce the healthiest genetics. And whoever has the healthiest genetics is going to breed. So it is such a night and day difference from what I was taught by humans versus what I was taught from Cisco and the other horses. Because every single one of those horses that's out there, I know them. We've made a connection with each other. I've not asked them to do anything for me. I have no agenda with them. I've not tried to make them, you know, into anything. And I get to know them at their essence level, where they don't have to have any defenses with me or protective mechanisms or they have to hide anything. We show up and we get to be exactly who we are. And that's why it's such a sacred space.
Yeah.
How often in your life do you get to experience just totally being you, feeling safe? And I'm very well aware Mustangs can move very quickly. So I'm aware who's around me, but I have no fear somebody's trying to hurt me. I just get it. Like they might have an issue with each other. So one might push the other off, and I just have to be aware. But there is no fear. And that is something that, especially in learning for me on my spiritual path, to take my own power back. And it wasn't power over another, which is what I was taught through my childhood and through my adulthood. It's a very different sense of power now
Mm-hmm.
in that sacred space, and understanding the humility of it. Of, yeah, there are things that I will use my power for, you know, like if the farrier's there and I've got to get my little horse over into the thing and he's like, I don't really want to go. And I'm like, I need you to do this for me now.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden he goes, okay. Like that's about how much I will exert my power over him. But it's not even like over him. It's just saying, we need to do this together right now. And I need your full attention. And I need you to not backtalk.
To me, it's a lot like.
And as soon as he understands that I'm standing in my power, right, he's like, okay, that's fine. But I'm not like, I don't have a stick. I'm not hitting him. I'm not yelling at him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just telling him, I've dropped into my power fully. I'm mom right now. This is what we need to do. Can you do this with me? And he goes, yeah, okay.
Yeah, to me, it's a lot like,
So it's been an extraordinary
yeah,
experience.
to me, it's a lot like raising children, and, you know, where we have to be firm, but yet, you know, just totally there. And in the moments, like as a dad, where I haven't, where I've let myself get in the way, that's where the lack of communication begins and sprouts. But by maintaining firmness within that realm of empathy and love is like a really powerful thing. I really, yeah, beautiful how you've expressed that. What's your favorite way to reinforce your horse?
Yeah. I guess it's like different, you know, and whatever the moment is. Like, I'm not working with treats, and I'm not working with like sticks or even halters when I'm out, you know, in the pasture with the horses. So I might be asking Pooh Bear to back up, right? And I'll put my hand like right at his chest bone, and I'll just gently tap and say, you know, I'll show him the picture. I need him to back up. And if he does it, I just pat him right on the side of his neck. I'm like, that's awesome. That's exactly what I need. Like, that feels good. You know what I mean? Like, it feels good. If I ask you for this and you give it to me, that's wonderful. You understood what I said. That feels great. There's other times I'll just reinforce them and be so grateful to them because they're so gentle. Like, I'll be standing there, I'll be with another horse, and all of a sudden, like, Pooh Bear or Bella will come up and they just gently, like, will touch my right shoulder, right? Just their nuzzle to my shoulder. They could have come in and walked over me. They could have come in and they could have tried to bite. And like when they do that gentle and that's that sweet and they have that respect for my body and my being, I reinforce it with just so much gratitude.
Yes.
I'll give them a hug or give them a kiss and I'll just tell them, thank you for being so gentle. You know, like reinforcement is an interesting thing. I mean, I know lots of people are using treats and stuff like that. Whether I'm dog training or whether I'm working with my horses, my treat is my love and my affection. And that doesn't mean that I withdraw my love and affection when you don't give me what I want. I love you unconditionally. In that moment, that might be like, hey, Pooh, I'm asking you to back up. Well, walking into me isn't what I'm asking you for. So let's just try this again. So I'm not withdrawing love, but if you look at any animals in nature, whether it's wolves, wild horses, bears, the parents aren't giving their kids food. That's not, food is for eating. Food is for sustenance. The energy of I'm proud of you and thank you and that was awesome, or the energy of, hey, that's not exactly what I wanted you to do. Let's try this again. That's how I reinforce, you know, and I'm always in an unconditionally loving space with my horses. However, that doesn't mean that there's no boundaries. This is like one of the biggest things that I learned from Cisco. He said, just because, you know, I love you unconditionally, it doesn't mean there isn't healthy boundaries. He's like, I love you unconditionally no matter what. And codes of conduct and behavior also need to be respectful. So I'm always reinforcing what I really want. I don't ignore what I don't want. Like, like Bella, a couple times she's gotten a little mouthier than I would like because she's now starting to play with her brother and her uncles and her cousins and all that stuff. And I'm like, hey, I'm not a horse. You know, like your teeth touch me even a little.
Right.
It hurts. Don't do that. You got to have respect. And as soon as she backs off and she's like, oh, sorry, I forgot. I'm like, it's okay. Just be careful. And B, I don't like to teach my horses or my dogs to be ignorant, like just pay attention to me and ignore
Mm-hmm.
everything else. I want them to have their intelligence. I want Bella to have as much wild intelligence as she could possibly have. And I want her to know how to be in space with me where we're both safe. And I've got different rules than what the horses have. And my rules are my rules because she's got a head that can swing. She could knock me out in one blow. So she has to take the responsibility. Okay, when I'm around human, I've got to still be aware of myself. And this way, she never gets cut off from her wild self. And she also understands, okay, being around human is a little bit different. And she can be responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
That way I know I'm keeping her intact with being a really intelligent being.
I love that. And
simultaneously, what a lot of people do is they like to cut the animals off from their natural intelligence. I don't like to do that. I want a horse that knows who they are, knows how, to hear and feel their surroundings, knows how to stay grounded and centered in themselves. I don't want an animal that I dumb down. I want an animal that I bring out their greatest intelligence.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you ride a lot?
I have not ridden in probably the last time I rode Cisco was about 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't ride my Mustangs. I don't know if at some point we will ride. Like Mama, I've had her for 2.5 years. She still doesn't even want to be touched. She'll hang out. She'll be 2 feet from me. And she'll hang out when I'm hanging out with the kids. But as soon as I go to reach out to touch her, she's like, nope. So for her, could I train her and could I get her ridden? Sure. Do I want to? No. She doesn't want it. And I don't have to ride her. I don't have any agenda with her. Pooh Bear is on the smaller side and he's 3 years old, so I don't know if he'll be a riding horse or not. I mean, I think he could handle my weight. I would never put anybody bigger than me on him. And Bella is not even 2 yet. So riding, if I have a riding horse, she'd probably be my riding horse because she's going to be, the biggest out of all of them. But we'll see. I just don't have that agenda right now. I'm just happy hanging out with them. We train in terms of like, hey, I just need you to know, like, if I need you to back up, this is what back up means. If I need you to go to the right, if I need you to go to the left, if I need you to follow me. So we've got that kind of like groundwork training down just so that, we're safe and just God forbid there's an emergency. They can trust me, that I'm going to take care of them and that if I need them to hold still, they will. But riding, it's weird. Riding right now is not on my agenda. I had a really bad fall off of Cisco about 2010. And it was my fault because I did not listen. Cisco had gotten injured a year and a half before. I thought he was more rehab than he was. And it was like the perfect opportunity. I was sitting on the fence. He was sitting right there. I was like, oh, can I just like throw my leg over you? Because before that we had been riding. And he said, he's like, no. And I didn't understand why he said no. And I got on him anyway. I had his halter on. And we were walking a little bit and then we just came down this little slight hill and he hit a point where he went into pain. I didn't have a saddle, so he shook his shoulders and I fell off and I broke 13 bones. So that was a big eye opener. Like, you better listen when your horse tells you something. Do not try to override it. So, I landed up rehabbing myself well after that. But it was also a whole nother set of lessons about being with my horse
Yeah.
on the ground, because I couldn't ride for a long time. So we would literally go out for like long walks, like you take your
Mm-hmm.
dog for a walk. That's what I did with Cisco and his brother Jesse. We'd just go for long walks, and I learned
Mm-hmm.
a lot from him about training just from
Yeah.
walking together. It was wild. I would never have thought I could have learned some of the things that I learned, but it took not being on his back, you know, to learn to really trust myself on the ground, to be his leader, to even deserve the privilege of then being able to go
Yeah.
and get on his back. So it totally shifted
It's so
my mindset.
amazing. After Mocha died, we went through a similar process. I completely stopped riding Cody for well over a year, and just spent time with him, like you're mentioning. And now I do ride, but it's on his terms. I
Right?
I asked him, we can ask our horses, hey, can I get on? And they'll tell us yes or no. And
Yep.
we just acknowledge that every single time. And
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
there
That's what builds so
mhm,
much trust. When your horse feels, we're always looking at it from the perspective of,
mhm,
can I trust my horse? And I'm like, are you kidding? Are you a trustworthy human
right.
for your horse? Your horse
Yeah.
trusts you. That's what most people get, right? Whether you're riding or you're not riding. I think that that's one of the biggest things that I've learned. Like, oh my God, can I be a trustworthy human? Am I integrous? Do I say one thing to my horse and then do another? Like, do I give my horse my
Mhm.
word and I honor it? Because just like a human being, I mean, animals know whether you're trustworthy or not trustworthy. Why would I want to follow a leader that's not
Yeah, none of
trustworthy?
us do.
Why would I want to follow a leader that won't listen to me? You know, like, I mean, it actually doesn't even make sense when you really pull back and think about it. I've met so many horse people that have so much more riding experience, technical experience, medical experience. I mean, more experience than I will ever have in certain areas. They don't
Yep.
listen to their horses. They talk at their horses. They talk to their horses. They don't have a relationship and a
Mhm.
connection of being essence to essence with a horse. Like, it just, you get to that level and then you just start to see how much stuff about horses and what people say they know about horses, and even people that are really good at training and really good at,
Mhm.
different performance things. You really start to see the connection, that sacred connection, that being in communion together.
Yep.
It's
And it's
not
a
there.
completely different realm. It
And
just Yeah. And
yeah,
as we're more open to it as humans, they reciprocate, as you know. It's an amazing thing.
yeah,
Well, Alicia, where can we find your book? Or is it out yet? Or is it forthcoming? Do you have a title?
it's not out yet. The title is called Sittings with Cisco, and it's really a perspective, because 9/11 was a huge catalyst for me to get out of New York and come out to Colorado. So, and part of that journey was meeting Cisco and understanding what the horses, um, really what their collective consciousness wants to share with humanity, and how to help us up level our own way of being, and how to up level our consciousness and how to up level our spiritual understanding, like of who we are, and get back into connection and communion with all life. So, it's written, it's in the process, the first stages of it being edited. So I'm hoping that within the next 30 days, I've got it to be able to share with people. And it's, things are interesting. Like when Cisco taught me about fear, I had no idea how long that would take for me to really grasp that whole fear thing, and how we walk around with so much fear. And as I marinated with it, it got so much deeper. That's what's happening with the book. I wrote the book 16 years ago about our experiences. And as we are talking, and thank you guys so much for this opportunity, because I really didn't grasp the depth of how important this book is for horses, for humans, and literally for our spiritual evolution.
Sounds like it.
And
I'm looking forward to reading it.
Yeah, you got me hooked.
Yeah, I will get you guys a copy as soon as it's put into its more book form.
Yeah. Now, is Cisco the white horse you're sitting next to in the picture that you shared with us? Yeah.
The one where I'm on the ground?
Gotcha.
So that's Pooh Bear. And my dream, like for the last 2 years that I've had my horses and before Cisco passed, I wanted Cisco to have his own family. And when my Mustangs came in, I was like, oh my God, okay, this is it. Like, we get to be on our ranch with our family. And I didn't get to do that. It just, circumstances didn't have things go the way I wanted to go. But somehow, Pooh Bear, literally, I do not have any idea because they've never met personally. But somehow Cisco put his spiritual DNA into both of my babies. Because Pooh Bear, I mean, he does things sometimes and my jaw is on the floor. Because I didn't get Cisco till he was 7. So I didn't know him through his childhood. And he had a really big gash on the right side of his tongue. Like something really bad must have happened. And this Pooh Bear, even the blaze on the front of his face is the exact same direction and specifications as Cisco's.
It's amazing.
And I feel like somehow Cisco left me with a gift of raising, this little guy since he was 5 months old. And it was like an opportunity that I never had with Cisco. Because Cisco had some really bad experiences with a farrier. He had every right to be pissed off at humans. Let's put it that way. And Pooh Bear, when he came from a kill pen. He was separated from his mom for a week because they were trying to, gentle his mom. And he knew that his mom was pregnant. So he had a rough start too, where he was trying to protect her at 5 months old. And he definitely had a little bit of an attitude. I mean, he was pissed. So seeing so many correlations just blows my mind.
Oh man, that opens up for a whole new topic of discussion that we could talk hours on, because it alludes to
whole new book.
Right, it alludes to quantum mechanics and morphic resonance and all these types of things. Wow, all the woo. Well, shoot, where can our listeners find out more about you? And
you can visit AlleciaMaine.com, ALLECIA, Maine, MAINE, like the state.com. And I'll drop you guys a link for my YouTube channel, which shows I've got 23 different episodes of all kinds of animals that I worked with. Wolves, wolf dogs, wild horses, dogs, cats, mules. But yeah, it's crazy because I never really put the pieces together that since I came out to Colorado, because of Cisco, because of the horses, that's what actually, those Mustangs led me to doing my PhD, because they wanted to prove what they know about quantum entanglements, about body alignment being a major factor in behavior issues and health issues. And they were the ones, just like I didn't have meeting a Chinese master on my bucket list, I did not have doing a PhD on my bucket list. But because of these horses, they've basically proven quantum entanglements. They've proven the unified field theory. And while quantum physicists might not agree with the method of how it was done, the horses are like, who cares? We already know all of this stuff.
Yeah.
We're trying to really educate you humans about it in really simple ways. So that's what's been, it's been
That's so
fascinating.
fascinating. Maybe we could have you back sometime and go more into detail on that, because it's definitely a topic of interest of mine personally, and I know a lot of other people are interested in it as well.
I would love it, because it's really, like, even though I'm the human here, right? So I'm the one that has opposable thumbs and can write things down and take dictation or type things into the computer. It's really not about me. It's really about what these animals know and what they actually want to teach us. So I guess to really fully answer your question of like, how do I reinforce the horse? I just listen and I take dictation, and then I share what they've told me is their truth with humanity.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I love that.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable and
I'm
sharing.
sure you guys are on that same path.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, definitely. And
thank you for everything that you are doing. You starting this podcast. Thank you. It's so beautiful to see a dad and daughter team, right? That are like actually on the same page, and that are sharing this beautiful journey, with each other and with the horses. And, you remind me of the horses, right? Because, I mean, the dads adore their daughters on the range. And so I think it's so cool that you guys are working with Mustangs, and I just can't wait to hear more and more about what you guys discover on your journey.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And I think, we'll end on that note, and we'll definitely keep you on the loop, and I'd love to chat with you more.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much, Allecia.
Thank you guys so much.
You take care.
Have a beautiful day. Yeah, you too.